Our speaker today is Ms. Judy Dorsey with the Brendle group here in Fort Collins. Judy has 21 years of executive leadership in sustainability and innovation. Her specialties include district scale and community scale planning and climate and energy, clean energy, sustainable economic development, organizational development, and net zero energy and water initiatives. She's completed over 200 plus sustainability projects with 100 clients across 20 different states. She co-founded the Colorado Clean Energy Cluster and helped spearhead two of its primary initiatives. One of those initiatives was the International Clean Tech Network, which is a global network connecting the world's leading clean tech clusters. And the second one was something called Fort Z, which is an initiative to create one of the world's largest active net zero energy districts. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the C3E Entrepreneurship and Innovative Business Models, Climate Change Hero at the Aspen Climate Conference, and the Denver Business Journal Outstanding Women in Business. Judy, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Name tags help. This is great. Let's see. I understand that we have until 5 if we need it. And I have about a 45-minute or so presentation, but I like informal conversation. So I'm eager to know what's on your mind. And you saw me on the syllabus, and maybe you had some thoughts. What does that mean, and what's that all about? So let's keep it informal and conversational. I'd love to hear what you all have to share on this topic of sustainability in the ski industry. A little bit at first about Brendle Group. Brendle Group is an engineering and planning firm. We're focused in sustainability only. So we don't do anything that isn't in the sustainability realm. We practice at this intersection of engineering and sustainability. And we're close by. You may recognize this building. We're just 2 blocks north of, I guess 1 block north of here on Mulberry Street at 212 West Mulberry. And our purpose, the purpose of our company, is to apply our engineering and consulting talents that create lasting impacts to sustain and inspire our communities and our world. Our purpose is why we're in business. We would consider ourselves a social or sustainable enterprise where we're a for-profit company. We're doing very well financially, but we have a social mission to create those lasting impacts, and that our mission, which our mission is kind of like mission, put man on moon. We're on our 3rd mission of our 19-year-old company. Our 3rd mission, which we're just nearing completion on, is within the next 5 years to identify, lead, and catalyze with our customers the next significant innovation in sustainability, and to share that with an international audience. I'm an engineer by training, so when I was an undergrad and we learned about sustainability, it was called equilibrium, and it was sort of sustained, steady state. So if somebody were to ask me, how's your marriage going with your husband of 21 years? And I would say, it's sustainable. They might not think that was such a positive response. So why don't we look to what's beyond sustainability? What's inspiring? What's restorative? Where do we find abundance? And that's what we're working on in our current mission. Maybe an interesting side story. I started Brendle Group when our son was born to figure out work-life balance as an engineer. And he's now a sophomore in college. So just a little bit younger than most of you in your master's years here at Colorado State. Let's see. Just to get to know my audience a little bit better, you're pursuing your master's in natural resources. So I'm assuming you somewhere along the way have had a course in sustainability, but I don't want to make that assumption. Is it a safe assumption that you have otherwise been introduced to sustainability? Okay, so I'm not going to go into depth then about this topic since it's not specific to this seminar, but that's specific to my lecture today, is around sustainability in the ski industry. And to us at Brendle Group, it's very simple, just not using resources past the rate at which the Earth systems can replenish them. But we also apply a triple bottom line approach to sustainability, looking at the economic, the social, and the environmental impacts of our decisions. Just by way of further introduction, we have a long history and roots with Colorado State. I did my master's here in engineering in the early 90s, and Colorado State University is a customer. So we'll talk about sustainability in the ski industry, but there's also a whole other parallel universe around sustainability in higher ed, not just in curriculum delivery, but in facilities and operations. So we've helped the university create its carbon neutral plan. We've written the university's green construction standards, have helped with lighting audits and energy efficiency audits and things like that. Obviously, opportunities and experiences like this in terms of adjunct faculty and sharing our knowledge and experience, a number of our team members provide those types of services. In the introduction, you heard about Fort Zed. That's a joint research project with Colorado State University. And then workforce, we hire alumni and serve also on the Dean's Advisory Board in the College of Engineering to help with workforce development around sustainability. If we were to put what we do into a picture, we have 5 service areas that are all these slices that kind of lead up to what we would consider mountain sustainability, if you will. Sustainability planning and management, energy, water, climate change, which includes both mitigation and resiliency or adaptation to a changing climate, as well as sustainable design. And we deliver those services to 4 sectors that you see here, but today we're focusing specifically on the tourism and ski industries. In terms of our work, like I mentioned, we're a 19-year-old company. We have a handful of customers that we have worked with literally since almost our inception. One of those is the National Ski Areas Association. So in some regards, we feel like we've kind of grown up together in sustainability with the ski industry, if you will. If you consider sort of an enterprise, a private company, as almost having the life cycle of a human, where we've kind of grown up together in sustainability. And so we've worked with the National Ski Areas Association, which is the trade association delivering member services to ski areas around sustainability programming and services, as well as direct consulting to ski areas. And when we're working with ski areas, it's anything from energy and water efficiency assessments, renewable energy projects, green building standards, all those things that you saw on Mount Sustainability delivered to a ski area. This is just a list of some of the ski areas we served. And I wanted to take a break and also kind of get to know the audience a little bit better. Do we have anybody in the audience who is specifically interested in a career in the ski industry in some capacity? Some yes or no's, a few hands as possibilities. Great, so hopefully this is a useful orientation too to what some of the things are that are occurring with regard to that industry. What about avid skiers? Maybe that's not the industry you want to end up with, but some familiarity with this from a consumer standpoint. Looks like some head nodding too. So maybe you see some of your favorite ski areas here, but just wanted to kind of take a pulse of who we have with us today. One of the things that in our line of work, whether it's in the ski industry or any other industry, part of what our process is to assess where our customer is with regard to sustainability and try and take them as far and as fast as they can go from there. Sort of a developmental approach to sustainability. And to do that, there's a recognition that there's a natural maturation curve, if you will. It might be some ski area that is literally just getting started. So like say 19 years ago, and the language and the tools and the resources around sustainability were also nascent and emerging. Some ski areas may have just been hearing the term for the first time. So this you can kind of think of as a bit of a matrix where maybe they were just starting to have a recognized need. The next step up on the maturation curve is they're starting to measure and monitor where they are. Then they're actually planning a coherent response. Then they're quantitatively managing a holistic program. And then really kind of that, fifth level, if you will, of performance is optimizing or institutionalizing your sustainability efforts. Questions while I take a quick drink to not cough too much?
So the groups that you work with, I assume they come in at different levels, right? Some are at maybe the plan response stage and you're helping them move from that stage on.
Exactly.
How many are starting out at the bottom?
Well, it's a bell curve. And today, versus 19 years ago, I would say, more are starting in a more of a planned response posture. But really, I jokingly, but mostly seriously, have said in our 19-year history, the first decade was about education and persuasion, not just in the ski industry, but in any sector, around the need and the value proposition and the available tools and approaches to sustainability. Really, it felt to us almost like a sea change once it hit critical mass, that there were enough understanding and buy-in to the principles and enough resources and tools that demonstrate the business case that we started to see a much more rapid uptake, and people were entering into, asking for services in a more mature position. Well, in our case, we try to take a quick look at our customers. Some have very sophisticated understanding and models around sustainability, and therefore we're in a different type of a role than others that are just kind of saying, hey, gee whiz, we know this is important and everybody's doing it, but we don't even know where to start, and please educate us. So that's that. One thing I will also say, though, in our go ahead.
Do you find, you mentioned the word sustainability, like even within the ski industry or across different industries, does that vary a lot as to what they're actually trying to achieve when they say we're trying to be more sustainable, and or they bring you in to try and say help us become more sustainable?
Yeah, it does. The National Ski Area Sustainable Slopes Program has a charter document, Sustainable Slopes, which is their environmental charter, and it has about 21 different principles or topic areas, ranging from the natural environment and riparian areas and sustainable water management and view sheds, et cetera, to more built environment, energy management, procurement, et cetera. So there's sort of a also kind of maturing lexicon, if you will, or framework around the topic areas that sustainability covers in the ski industry as well. But one thing I will mention too is even that word sustainability, we used to joke in the early years of Brendle Group that you couldn't say the S word, east of I-25, or depending what region we were in, north of this boundary or this boundary, just because it was not understood or an accepted term. And there was also an early kind of sense that you were either pro-business or pro-environment, and neither the two shall meet. Whereas from our view, that was a kind of a, if you go back to our purpose statement, it was a threat, really to our business to have that kind of a view. So our second mission, we're on our third mission, our second mission was to prove the business case for sustainability. And a lot of our middle years, and still to this day, but a lot of those middle years were really trying to develop the evidence, the tools around the business case for sustainability. So even the terminology has evolved, and the acceptance of the terminology has evolved. So I wanted to mention, so Sustainable Slopes, their environmental charter came out in 1999. And so for perspective, we started Brendle Group in 96. So that, like I was saying, a lot of parallel efforts there. The annual sustainable, there is an annual report if you're interested. And I should at this time also mention that Kip, when he was finishing his bachelor's degree, was an intern for us and did a lot of the research, compiling and cross-referencing the data in these annual reports over the last decade in some of our research and journal articles that I'll share with you today. But anyway, so it's been over a decade of resources that this National Ski Areas Association has been providing to their ski area members around sustainability, from energy guides for small resorts to there's a Ski Area Citizens Coalition scorecard, sort of some discussion about what that means, and some supporting resources to ski areas, a Keep Winter Cool campaign, renewable energy credits, green power campaign, various conference technical sessions. They have an annual grants program, and they also have awards and recognition program in the form of the Golden Eagle Awards. So there's a long kind of history of what the NSAA has been doing in terms of supporting its members along that maturation curve to kind of help move the industry along. So then I wanted to pass around a few things. This article came out this winter, actually November of 2014, so just a couple of months ago, on Cover story, doomed. Ski areas will close if climate change isn't tackled. Read how the NSAA is helping North American ski resorts take positive action. First I was like, yikes, what is this article here about? But then when you open it up and read in depth, it's about the National Ski Areas Climate Challenge program and how they're proactively getting out in front of climate change through their voluntary program of having ski areas participate in their own greenhouse gas inventory and reduction activities, which I'll talk about here shortly. But I thought I would just kind of pass some of these things around if you guys want to see that. I also have just a couple of other items to pass around if you're interested that go into a little bit more detail about some of our work in ski area sustainability. I don't know if we want to do that. So this is kind of a transition slide to move away from broadly what's been happening over the last 15 years into specifically the Climate Challenge program. Let's see. So the Climate Challenge program is now in its third year, and it with the National Ski Areas Association. And the first year, there were 7 founding ski areas that were members, and now it's up to 30 ski areas that are participating. It's a voluntary program where ski areas commit to, well, let me just go through this. There was a large demand in that ski areas are interested in measuring their greenhouse gas inventory and voluntarily doing something about their contributions to a changing climate. And some were participating and some not interested. So this is kind of showing the demand for the program and the growth curve there. But basically how the program works, there's sustainable slopes that I mentioned earlier and all the 21 principles across these different sustainability topics is also a voluntary program, but it doesn't have any requirements or reporting efforts, and it isn't quite as quantitatively rigorous. So as the program evolved, they wanted to have a little bit more rigorous offering in addressing climate change, and so created the Climate Challenge program. The required elements are for ski areas to measure their greenhouse gas emissions inventory, to set a target. So this is how much our emissions are now. We want to have our emissions be less by a certain year. Actually do something every single year to reduce their emissions on mountain through their own operations and report that annually and publicly. And new this year is a requirement to also get involved in climate change advocacy. So whether it's federal or state legislative issues or other forms of advocacy, to use the industry as a platform for advocating for climate change. That's what's required. Encouraged and supported are to link to and support community climate planning, education, and other environmental initiatives. So the Climate Challenge has a number of tools for ski areas to use to support their efforts in reducing greenhouse gas emissions that range from decision support tools to reporting tools and other efforts. Let's see, you had asked a question about what is the definition of sustainability. Sometimes, and you also asked about the maturation curve. So sometimes you could say, an organization of 400 seasonal employees and maybe 100 year-round employees might in itself have a bell curve of understanding, acceptance, buy-in around sustainability. So part of what we also provided were some educational materials so that the point of contact who was doing the greenhouse gas inventory and otherwise participating could then educate their across their organization, including up their organization to a management overview on kind of the business case for climate mitigation. So just some highlighting results. We don't have the 30 resorts that are now in the program. Some of them just joined. So as of the last reporting period, 19 ski areas had implemented 33 projects over 2 years and are saving $177,000. That's annually. And you can see some of the reductions from their actual greenhouse gas emissions inventory here. This is a list of those ski areas, the 19, and the targets that they each set. There was a question earlier in earlier conversations, like, was there any discussion when they formed the program of should they all set the same target? And a voluntary program also can mature over time. And at the time that we were forming it, it was really also in that kind of early stages of getting ski areas even to that point of measuring, managing, and setting a target. We wanted to give full flexibility and latitude for ski areas to set their own reduction target. So any questions about the climate challenge? Because now I'm going to go into one other study that built on that.
On the last slide, some of them did set like a higher reduction percent. Are those ski areas smaller and they were, they knew they could meet it a lot faster? Or I was just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Some of them are a little bit deceiving because they look larger, but it's more from year to year. And there was a kind of a rule that you had to implement a project on site towards your target, but you could also use some in a balanced portfolio of efforts are also purchasing carbon offsets or renewable energy credits. So there's sort of different philosophy and strategy from some ski areas. That's why some of their goals are higher or lower than others, and some it's kind of compared to a baseline year. So let's say Alta, 10% from 2011 by 2020 is just a little different format than year per year. But generally, you're right. These are different format, but also different magnitudes. Some are more aggressive than others, and why is that? I think it's kind of, yes, one reason could be the potential that each ski area has to actually reduce their emissions and their understanding of that. And another is some from a management position might be more cautious about setting goals, and others trying to set more aggressive goals to inspire other change. So there's also different management philosophies on aggressiveness around goals. But it's a great observation and a great question.
So, do you find those that set more aggressive targets, are they that better approach than kind of being conservative? Is there kind of, have you noticed a trend, or do you recommend a way to set targets?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Would you recommend a way to set the targets? Is it sometimes better to be more aggressive, or do you find that actually those are more conservative and more realistic, tend to be more achievable?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of what we recommend, we try to coach our customers through the pros and cons of a more short-term, specific, measurable, attainable goal versus a maybe long-term and transformative goal. So one thing, just as a sidebar comment, on Tuesday night, City Council, you all are welcome as citizens of Fort Collins, Colorado, to go to City Council in person or to watch on television as Council discusses and takes public input on a community goal to potentially pursue 80% greenhouse gas emissions reduction below by 2030. So the interesting thing about that is the city of Fort Collins had previously had a 20% reduction target by way back when they first set them, by 2010. And so if you're setting an incremental target, it sure is sort of process improvement, but if you're setting a 80% reduction, you're talking of transformation completely in how energy flows are occurring in your economy. So similarly, if a ski area were to set very aggressive goals, then a set of, continuous improvement incremental measures won't get them there. But it depends on the kind of tolerance of the ski area and what how far out they're trying to get ahead of the curve, if that makes sense. So we don't necessarily recommend one over the other. We coach a customer through the different types of goals and pros and cons. What oftentimes we do end up with then, based on that coaching, is that ski areas or other customers might have short-term goals and then some longer-term goals. Good questions. Were you going to ask something too?
Well, it just seems like a 64% or 60% reduction. It's almost unbelievable. How do you do that? You had to be doing something really bad in 2012 to get a 60% reduction in 1 year.
Yeah, so Natalie and I were talking about this earlier because she just came back from the Eastern Trade Show and Killington. What's happening in Vermont, some interesting things around what's called cow power, where when we were talking earlier about RECs, where you can purchase your electricity to be greenhouse gas free because it's made with basically cow manure through anaerobic digestion. That's you're paying a premium for, but you're just like we can buy wind energy in Colorado. So it's not that they're doing anything necessarily really bad, but what we're observing here and some of these others is this effect where they're also purchasing some RECs to offset. Yeah. So that's why you're seeing some of that. Let's see, I'm trying to see. Same with Park City. Yep, that's a similar approach. Now, not to disparage, I mean, these resorts really have some pretty, some of the most innovative on-mountain things occurring, but they're also then participating in that purchase of those programs. Great questions. So we're at a kind of a natural transition to the next part of what I was hoping to chat about. So are there any other questions so far about the ski industry and this particular topic of sustainability? All right, so now we get to share with you, it's kind of exciting that Kip's in the class because the culmination of his internship, he provided a lot of the underlying research along with our sustainability analysts at Brendle Group in partnership with a Boulder firm called NRRT to create this article that was published 1 year ago in the NSAA journal on the dollars and cents of sustainability in a study about the return on investment. So, and I'll pass this around too for your interest. So I wanted to explain this study and why it was so important to advancing sustainability in the industry. For many, many years, as I said, in some regards, Brendle Group kind of grew up in sustainability with the industry and had been collecting data year in, year out from voluntarily reported data from ski areas about what they were doing in their annual Sustainable Slopes reporting, as well as data in the Golden Eagle Awards, the awards program, as well as data in this Climate Challenge program. So we had a lot of information on, resorts are implementing lighting efficiency and installing renewable energy projects and doing all these various things to improve their mountain operations. Meanwhile, for a longer history, RRC out of Boulder had been monitoring the financial performance, the economic performance of the industry through an annual economic survey where ski areas would literally turn in kind of a standardized template version of their income statement and balance sheets and a few other data points so that the industry as a whole could characterize what are the economic ratios or factors that really characterize the financial health of a ski area. So if you're a ski area manager, you could say, oh, here's how my ski area is operating financially. How does that benchmark against ski areas of my size and in my region and overall? And what you should be watching out for in terms of different ratios of where your revenues and expenses are occurring across departments and things like this. So they had this whole kind of tool, if you will, for ski area managers to be able to monitor their financial performance. We had been collecting all this economic data. And outside of the ski industry, there's been a lot of studies showing that sustainability can improve the ROI and of your business at the enterprise level, not just down at the individual capital improvement project level. So with NSAA, we said, hey, Brendle Group had been doing some research to figure out outside of the ski industry how, like, say, textiles or electronics or other, industries and standard goods produced could make these claims around improved sustainability performance. And a lot of what was occurring is those were in publicly traded situations. So like with the Dow Jones Sustainability Index and other data sources over time, researchers could demonstrate a positive correlation between sustainability and economic performance, but the trick is having access to reliable data. So we said, well, this industry is mostly privately held, and could we learn from some of the methodologies of other industries and kind of create a customized approach to trying to untap or characterize this. So we went about this study with RRC, and we published the results in this paper, in this journal article, and we presented on it last year in Steamboat at the annual winter conference, and it really did raise a lot of interest, where ski areas are now saying, yeah, well, we're even now more interested, or those who've always been interested are like, we're very interested now in trying to manage it at the enterprise level. So the first thing we had to do is figure out among resorts who's doing what. And so in total, 115 ski areas responded. We added a question to the annual economic survey asking what ski areas were doing with regard to sustainability program types. And the highest response was in food and beverage, and then in utility energy management, and then existing buildings, snowmaking, HR, et cetera, on down the line. In total, over 75% of the ski industry is doing something already. Ski areas are doing something with regard to sustainability. You can see the kinds of things that they're working on. So what we did was, this list, we had to start to shape everything that ski areas have been doing over the last decade to sort of the formatting of the annual economic survey. So in this chart, there are 11 areas of types of sustainability projects across the industry, and we took the 6 highest in terms of financial performance as well as adoption rate in the industry, and we kind of built out an average first cost, annual cost savings, simple payback, and what percent of resorts in the last 2 years are doing this. So these are the highest adoption rate items and kind of overall financial performance in these 6 areas. And on the whole, you can see that there's an upfront investment, but the annual savings in total is quite significant. So there is a good opportunity here. But then you might say, well, big deal, is $400,000 a year a lot or a little for a ski area? If and does it even register within the natural fluctuations of a ski area's annual financials based on skier visits or the economy or snowfall, et cetera? So that was the next step. Now we're starting to shape the environmental sustainability data into the format of annual reporting. So as an intermediate step, we kind of took this top-down estimate. There's a guy, Bob Willard, who wrote a book called The Sustainability Advantage based on his 34 years at IBM, as well as interviews with a number of businesses, where he characterized 7 areas where businesses stand to gain economically from sustainability. And here they are highlighted: increased revenue, reduced energy expenses, reduced waste expenses, reduced materials and water expenses, employee productivity, hiring and attrition, and strategic and operational risks. And so he goes through in his book and he documents the evidence and then creates sort of a model, if you will, of default values so that a business can kind of put in its financial numbers and estimate what it's sitting on in terms of potential profit to them with regard to sustainability. So because RRC, if you're following my train of thought here, RRC, our partner, had characterized by size and by region what the average income statement and balance sheet looked like, we could put that data into the model and then recalibrate it based on bottom-up evidence of cost savings in the industry to project what we thought ski areas could stand to gain. Now his book was out. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just had a quick question. I was curious, when it talks about like human resources and cutting down on those expenses, what exactly does that look like? Like, of course, like saving paper and doing more stuff electronically, but how would you do that with personnel?
That's a great question. The 2 areas that are highlighted are hiring and retention. So in his book, he goes through the evidence from other companies around an ethos and sustainability and workforce, having an affinity there, and then putting that to dollar savings on being able to hire and retain people that are seeking a values-driven and sustainability-oriented employer. But the other is on productivity and safety. So one example is when you have lighting improvements that can also improve the productivity. A lot of these big savings that are cited in his book come more from manufacturing environments or also retail environments. But in this case, we had to kind of dial down what we thought were reasonable savings for the ski industry. But those are kind of some of the parameters that are included there. Some of these, but it also raises a good point that some of these are really direct. Like a ski area knows what they're paying in their utility bill, but it's a little harder to kind of directly correlate a sustainability practice to a safety improvement or a retention issue and so forth. But some ski areas are starting to do some surveys around this point so that they can get more evidence and to help continue to drive their programs. But that's a great question. And then the other one that's also a little bit more nuanced is that revenue growth. And again, in the book, he goes through and gives evidence of the consumer preferences around choosing products. And earlier somebody asked me, is there strong evidence yet that skiers will patterns of where they go based on sustainability performance of the ski areas? We aren't there yet in terms of strong data. Other industries have better data around there. So we dialed down significantly, but we did attribute some revenue growth from having an authentic, coherent, and comprehensive sustainability program and doing good, authentic kind of marketing and brand positioning around that. So this shows the results of, in 5 years, the overall, the industry, it's about a 2% gain in overall profit increase for the industry. You can see it's slightly different by region and slightly different, here this is chart by region.
Why is the Rocky Mountain one so low compared to the rest?
So low compared to others?
Significantly low, especially after 5 years.
Yeah, one thing we didn't get into causality, so we didn't get to dive in and say what happened there in the Rocky Mountain region versus Midwest or so forth. We could only surmise that. So Kip could be giving this lecture today because he was, like I said, was gathering data. So the other thing then that we worked with Kip to do is, so every ski area, we had 215 ski areas that we had data available through Sustainable Slopes or publicly through their website where they were disclosing what they were doing with regard to sustainability. And we created an index because we needed to now characterize some way to, we needed to find a way to characterize where different ski areas were on that maturation curve, and we kind of distilled it down to, do we think they were beginner green, slopes type ski areas? Were they intermediate blues or advanced blacks with regard to their sustainability program? And so that characterization was based on these points of available data, and we took those ski areas and kind of split them out on a grading scale so that about 43 were in that beginner mode of the bell curve, 42 in the blue, and then 30 in the black diamond. And then we said, okay, RRC, you have, here's who are our green, blue, and black, and tell us, how do these green, blue, and black compare in terms of their financial performance to the total sets? What ended up being interesting in this process when we were designing, we did not have a control group. So we didn't have sort of a zero sustainability group based on who was reporting economic data. It's kind of an interesting thing. So ultimately, if you are following my train of thought, this is overall green, blue, and black combined. There were 115 ski areas. So their average, this is their income statement. So you can kind of see their average profit loss before tax, and this is in thousands, 1.3 million. But basically, it's a 23% operating profit overall. The green guys were operating below the average by 4%. The blue are operating above the average, and and black slightly below the average, but not as far behind as green. So, this was a 1-year snapshot, and we were sort of testing and building out a methodology. But one can say, well, why did the blue squares outperform black diamonds? And some of the things we thought of, well, one is only 1 year of financial data. Another is, because it was 1 year, leading edge sustainability performers tend to look past that short term. They have a much more holistic, longer view. So to your earlier question about goal setting, they might be investing in something that they know will be paying off further down the road and are taking higher risk and higher reward type approaches. Also, when we looked at just the, somebody also asked a question about the size of ski areas and does that weigh into the types of goals. The Black Diamonds group tended to be those larger ski areas which had higher revenue, significantly higher revenue. So they had more financial wherewithal potentially to be investing in a more leading edge approach. So the bottom line is what we came up with as sort of a high level summary for the managers at ski areas is to say, okay, way back in the green building movement, they used to say, hey, if you could just take your green building budget and invest like 2% more, you'll have they were saying like 2 to 5% more, you can have a much higher performing building that over its life cycle performs better and you'll have overall net positive financial situation. So we were trying to kind of come up with some kind of generalized guidance for the industry. And so we said, okay, well, back to this table here. It was about $800,000. On average, all of the ski areas that we looked at had a average revenue of $23 million, those 115 ski areas. So we said $800,000 on average for a $23 million business is a 3.5% investment. So we're just saying, look at a 3% investment. And what we think will happen with that $800,000 is you'll get $242,000 back every year in reduced operating expenses, plus $242,000, we had a $229,000 increased revenue from your investment, because part of that investment was also a marketing position to capitalize on your coherent, high-functioning sustainability program. And so we showed that this 3% investment of your $23 million business, really $17 million of that is your operating expenses. So you have about a 1.4% cost savings. But when you look at your operating profit, the average operating profit on a $23 million business was $5 million. So if you add up the avoided costs and the increased revenue, that was an 8% profit increase. So that also kind of cross-checked and corroborated our Willard model too, when we were showing a 2% per year over 5 years, because this was kind of corroborating that effort. So that was kind of the overall result and messaging to the industry. We also wanted to see if that played out in the real life. So we asked a ski area that Brendle Group had been consulting with for a 5-year period and said, hey, can we use your data just to see how this plays out on the ground with a ski area, one ski area, so that it could be more of a peer-to-peer learning, learning experience. So when I mentioned that RRC has these annual economic indicators, some of the economic indicators are things like profit per skier visit. That's a key indicator. Alta's went up by 48 cents. Increase in profit per skier visit, which is actually a lot, because I'm trying to remember now what the total was, but it's a significant increase percentage-wise. Reduction in expenses per skier visit, 56 cents per skier visit savings, and a 0.5% improvement in their profit. So when we said earlier 2%, Alta actually realized 0.5%, but we didn't account, they hadn't done anything around the HR or the marketing side, so we weren't taking any credit for that. So that also kind of corroborated. Before tax on equity, but it was a 0.9% overall. So they got nearly 1% of that 2% profit improvement that we would have estimated for them, only accounting for half of the effort. So that also further corroborated. So now that's sort of the end of that story. I'm looking at the time check. We're at about 3:45. I have one more, kind of going to finish it up with some closing thoughts on where are things going next. But before that, I thought I'd just pause here too. Are there any comments or questions about why that's important, to link financial performance to sustainability in the ski industry or tourism even more broadly? Any comments, questions, reactions?
You mentioned that some people say, the more you spend, the more you save or improve your profit. I've heard that. I've got a friend who works in marketing, and he said that's with all the marketing sales guys. So you spend more on marketing, your sales will go up without any actual real evidence. And they're trying to find the fighting point for where that maximization is for the dollar spent. Is this are you reaching that point? It sounds like you're kind of the early stages, and are there kind of fluctuations around that, or is it kind of, are you finding there's a point where you say, right, you spend this amount, you can pretty much, this is what we're real in marketing.
Yeah.
But are you finding that point with sustainability?
Well, parts of sustainability are much more direct and easy to quantify than, let's say, marketing. But generally, yeah, if you spend more, your savings go up, and there are points of diminishing return. But a lot of it, to me, comes down to kind of access to capital and prioritization of other competing demands for that capital. But generally, from what we're finding, the industry is sitting on more opportunity than its current investment level. And so we were trying to show the case for higher investment into sustainability. And when you can do this, it doesn't necessarily have to come from the ski area itself. That attracts outside investors to certain types of projects, especially innovative projects around, renewable energy demonstration projects or collaborative partnerships with the utility that are proving out areas of, sustainable energy management and smart grid, or, things like this. So it can also, so it can attract investment, and it can also spur innovation too. All right, that's a great question. So the more you invest, what we were trying to say is, with evidence, is the more you invest, the more you get out. Right now, the industry is investing, but maybe under-investing, and here's a significant potential. So then we've been talking a lot about ski areas and what they're up to in sustainability, but another important thing to consider is the supply chain to ski areas. So we've also been trying to think about and provide tools and services to help ski areas green their supply chain. So when you think about a ski area experience, when you go to ski, your gear, your equipment, when you're on mountain experience in terms of retail and food services and so forth, there's a lot of embedded energy and carbon impact in the whole supply chain. So we helped convene with NSAA a webinar on supply chain management in the ski industry, and kind of just really started to introduce this concept to sustainability managers and others at ski areas, and kind of went through the basics of supply chain management and how that plays out in ski areas. And we had two speakers from the ski industry side to share their perspective, and then two from the supply side to share their perspective. And it was really interesting because the supply chain is very complex, but there are pockets of excellence and innovation in sustainability in the ski industry supply chain, especially if you look at, for example, apparel. We asked the supplier members to the National Ski Areas Association, have you taken steps to incorporate sustainability into your products and services? And some have. 36% had extensively been implementing some of these things, and a lot of them did tend to be on the apparel side. And how familiar are you with trends in sustainability and the supply chain, both within and outside? And so, again, a pretty high number were extensively familiar with sustainability. So we thought that was another important conversation to be having with ski areas around sustainability supply chain. And so when you get into that, if you think about your garment in Patagonia and don't buy that jacket kind of campaign, there's a lot. When earlier you asked too, what's the definition of sustainability? Well, for a ski area, there's this template around sustainable slopes, but when you start getting into supply chain, there are different templates, everything from human rights and labor, community building, there's environmental issues, and a lot around cost efficiencies and risk management in the supply chain. So really we were just starting this dialogue, trying to encourage partnerships between supplier members and ski areas to help advance each other's sustainability efforts, and helping suppliers to commit really for the ski areas, what they could be doing is commit that supply chain management is an important part of their sustainability program, set expectations with their suppliers, measure and reward progress with their suppliers, and then build capacity with their suppliers. So we had all kinds of really great examples from ski areas, especially Vail Resorts was the large ski area that spoke. Some really interesting things that they were doing from a procurement standpoint to be kind of articulating these values and expectations to some of their suppliers. We kind of tied that back to sustainable slopes. One of the areas is around waste management, another around procurement. So we made that linkage to ski areas so they could understand why this was important. And then we had these ski areas, like I said, Vail Resorts spoke, and then also a smaller ski area, Stevens Pass in Washington, about the things they were doing to, do green purchasing, not just things like recycled content, but just, toxicity and other environmental impacts to some of their purchases. And then we had the suppliers speak. We had Patagonia speak. We had a few other suppliers, and they could share what they were seeing, because some of the suppliers to the ski industry are obviously supplying multiple industries. So they were able to share what they were observing. So that's that. And really, at the end of the day, it was trying to create these models for working together between suppliers and ski areas. I wanted to say, through all of this, you might think, oh, you've been kind of growing up in sustainability. I've said it a few times. What's next on the horizon, and who's pushing the next frontiers, and what do those frontiers look like? The frontiers that we're seeing in sustainability broadly are also now there in the ski industry, whether one of them is net zero. So when we set goals earlier, it's like incremental improvements, a % reduction below a certain level. Well, some ski areas in certain areas are making commitments to zero, especially in waste, zero waste initiatives in ski areas. Some have or at least trying to pencil out what does net zero energy look like in a building, that kind of a thing. So really, that's kind of getting down to that holy grail of no net impact, not just less bad, but wholly good, no net impact. There are a lot of tough issues in sustainability. Where was it? I saw a bumper sticker at one of our ski areas where it said, "Being green takes a lot of energy," which I had I had to think about, like, okay, that's kind of a double entendre and mixed message. But anyway, it does. It takes a lot of work to really understand some of the challenges and issues. So I brought this up because Grand Targhee had a ban on water bottles. They were one of the first enterprises, let alone within the ski industry, to say no more. And when you think about hydration in skiing and just the whole issue around water, that's a pretty big deal to kind of take a leading edge stance on an issue like water bottles. Plastic water bottles. Also, so much of what and maybe this is more into your realm around tourism management, ski areas tend to be obviously a huge influence on the communities in which they operate, and there's a lot that ski areas are doing very proactively around supporting local economies and green jobs. Also, research. Many ski areas are operated on public lands, and it's not just because of public lands, but on private lands too. Ski areas are opening up their area to supporting critical research from in snow science and avalanche, climate change, etc. But also, it's to us, some of the leading edge work in sustainability is not just like the cool what's of renewable energy and solar panels and wind turbines and all these types of things, is what are the innovations in organizational development and culture change and social mobilization and these types of things. And it's been really heartening to see some of the efforts that some ski areas are being able to do to take on some work. Here's Sugar Bowl, for example, kind of advocating around 350.org. But there's a lot to do with the mental model of sustainability, and ski areas are an interesting, it's an interesting industry to kind of be a voice or sandbox, if you will, for all these different principles. So that's what I had in terms of formal material. Looks like we're doing good on time. I'll pause there and see if we can get a conversation going. Is anybody who saw the syllabus say, what the heck was that all about? Have any questions that weren't answered? Go ahead.
During the election cycle, do you guys work with nonprofits, 501c4s to push a certain agenda towards sustainability?
Uh-huh. Brendle Group in particular, or are you talking specifically the industry?
Brendle Group and the industry.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit to the industry. That's a great question. In terms of advocacy and legislative change at the state or federal level, NSAA is a nonprofit, but it has a lobbying function. It's not a 501c3. I'm not sure if it's a C4 or C6, but
C4 is one that has a lobbying function.
yeah, okay. So that's a separate question for NSAA at some point. But yes, they do have lobbying function, and they are active in Washington, and have had, I don't have it here, but a list of skiers then that are offered the opportunity to sign on to endorsing certain legislative issues, and they've been very, very active in that on climate change for at least 8 years. So yeah, so that's a great question. And partnering with nonprofits, you may have heard of Protect Our Winters, and they do work in advocacy and have worked with, NSA has worked with them on that type of thing. Let's see, election cycle. So those are some of the things that are going on that front. Any other questions, Natalie?
With the reporting, with the climate challenge, are any of the ski areas actually including transportation, as so guest transportation to and from resort in their reporting, or is that seen as totally separate?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the reporting does all cover protocol, and scope 3 emissions are voluntary, and to compare apples to apples, we're trying to report on scope 1 and 2. So some are and some aren't, and yeah, I guess that's just long and short of that answer there.
Are resorts doing anything to I guess, address?
Yes. The flip side is absolutely. There's a lot happening with regard to transportation, not just, across the industry, but in terms of partnerships with the, regional transit authorities and, bus and shuttle services. There's a whole series of actions that are happening there. And let me think. Yeah. Well, that's yeah. I don't know if that answers it quick enough. We can kind of dive in a little bit deeper if you would like, but a couple questions in the back there.
Do you think a ski resort can achieve sustainability? And when would that be? Like when you have a client, a ski resort?
Yeah. I feel like from our experience, sustainability is a journey, and I don't know if anybody individually or as an enterprise or as a community or whatever has wholly reached sustainability. It's like, yeah. But I would say, I guess it depends on one's definition. But if in the whole definition of no impact, net zero, that type of definition, I absolutely do believe it is attainable. Yeah. I think part of it, as an engineer, we look a lot at embedded systems and interdependencies within systems. So what I think we'll start to see from some of our work, for example, at the community scale in Fort Collins, when you're starting to get to 80% reduction targets, those are some transformative things occurring at the utility scale. So ski areas will become more sustainable in lockstep as the communities are becoming more sustainable, and as the electricity that's being provided to them is becoming more sustainable, and as the supply chains, and so it's a kind of a interdependent process then to kind of be able to put a kind of an island or a bubble around an individual enterprise.
One of the tables showed like the food and beverage as a leader for savings or focusing. Are there any particular things that are quite common across industry, any particular actions that, say, 80% of the ski resorts actually all do, whether it be food and beverage or another system?
A lot in food and beverage has to do with waste management, composting, recycling, trying to eliminate disposables, things like that. some other, so that's the most common. Less common, but also kind of present, is around, you know, organic food, locally sourced food, and greener supplies in that side. There's also aspects of food and beverage is more back of house on energy and water management and you know, cleaning supplies and those types of things. But predominantly, when you're saying the most common, is in that, really, the waste management side of things.
Do you, this isn't particular in the ski industry, but just I guess overall, when you have a customer come to you, how does it work, like at the ground level? Do you go to the location and do, like, you know, walk through and kind of make notes of what changes can be made and what different levels, what could be easier to start with? Like even CSU with all the renovations they do here.
Yeah, so we're kind of vertically integrated from management consulting down to kick the tires and on the ground level, physically inspecting facilities and operations. And so for, like, say, CSU, that was physically walking facilities and counting lighting fixtures, and then going back and calculating, you know, based on those observations, what energy savings there are and utility. So it's a combination of field work and desk work type thing. And some of that field work's in the boardroom, and some of that field work is out in the operations side of things.
Is the Brendle Group involved with any agricultural projects or the agriculture industry?
Well, the short answer, it would be more peripherally. We don't have a dedicated sector, but it's certainly, from our view, a very, you know, like next to energy, water, ag, those are the big three, and they're all interrelated. And so we're not directly, well, actually we are, let me explain where. So back to the energy audits, we perform energy audits for utilities on behalf of their customers. So we've done energy audits of a number of agricultural facilities, energy and water audits of agricultural facilities, kind of on the ground level operationally. When we're doing sustainability planning, food supply, when somebody was earlier asking, what's the definition of sustainability? When you're looking at a community level, many communities are placing a high emphasis on food supply. So we're involved more from that end. So those are the ways that we touch into it, but we don't have like a dedicated ag sector. But if that's an area of, well, can I ask why you asked? Is that area of interest or?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's important. But I mean, I think it'd be cool if ski resorts had little farms or something.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting that, well, you say that, well, because that cow power is an example of an ag ski industry intersection. And also, ski areas are in, well, it's maybe more in like ranch management type of in terms of the geography, you know, ranch management. But just like some enterprises are growing their own food, that certainly could be something ski areas could do, you know, more in, you know, hydroponics or indoors or whatever. But yeah, those types of things are getting into those advanced stages of sustainability and closing loops. And some ski areas have done some really interesting things on that front, though, around forest management and, you know, kind of the tangentially to ag, but on forest management and sustainability. So, yeah, I definitely think that's a very important topic, and it's something that we do bring up with our customers is ag and food supply, and for sure, very important.
Just a quick one. Extending ski season seems to be quite a big thing, particularly on the East Coast. Have you done any work on that, or have any particular views on it from a sustainable perspective?
Extending the duration of the ski season through snowmaking
or whatever. I don't know much about it, but I hear a lot about it. It seems to be something that crops up now and again. People boast about it and make a big deal about it. And
right.
Try and increase because they can increase revenues and there's more jobs. But
yeah,
from a sustainable perspective, that just screams wrong to me. Having not looked into it, and I wondered if you guys had looked at it or had any particular views on whether.
Yeah. We haven't looked into that particular issue for an eastern ski area, but I will say that broadly, the way that we address that is to provide decision support tools so that the ski area, along with its stakeholders, can make informed decisions about those trade-offs. And I think really that's what our job is as engineers, planners, and consultants, is to help make help our customers make informed decisions from all those angles. But I can't speak to that particular case.
Kind of building off of that, in terms of long seasons, I remember reading I think it was the Sustainable Slopes annual report, Climate Challenge document or something. A-Basin won an award for, I think, small resort sustainability, something. Steamboat also won an award for large one. And
Yeah. A-Basin, I think, won last. A-Basin and Steamboat, I think, last year.
And then I read that, and then I remember being at A-Basin a week or so later, and they were making snow, and this was just a couple weeks ago. And I was really surprised at that they were still making snow in January for how high they are and everything. But it is probably because they weren't skiing until July 4th or whatever. But I don't know, just kind of, maybe just even personally, like what you think about something like that when A-Basin is receiving this award, and then maybe building off of that marketing-wise and everything, and yet they're making snow until the end of January.
Well, I would say a couple of things popped to my mind. One is, as a skier at A-Basin, one thing that I admire about A-Basin's sustainability program is their president and general manager is accessible to you through their blog or otherwise, where you can provide that kind of feedback. It's easy to, there's also sort of a timing issue of when there's an application for an award. In fact, right now is the enrollment, where ski areas every year get a chance to apply for an award, and then that is announced in May, and then it comes out in the annual report in October, and then here you are skiing, and you read, so there's a certain, in fairness, a certain kind of disconnect, between the award and what you might be observing day to day. In terms of the particular question about snowmaking in January, again, it's back to decision support tools so that skiers can understand those trade-offs and opportunities there.
Can I just add something to that? I think snowmaking isn't as energy intensive as maybe you guys think it is anymore as well. I think a lot of the technology has improved a lot. So energy-wise, it is a lot more efficient, obviously depending on the skier, what they've invested in terms of technology. And in terms of water, isn't it something like 80-something% is actually returned back to the slopes? So very little water is actually lost.
Yeah, but it's also, in July, snow shouldn't be falling. Well, not it shouldn't be, but historically I would have thought recent times snow doesn't fall in July. So what impact are you having on the mountain as a whole, as opposed to sticking a whole bunch more people back on there? Or maybe it might even be less. If you put snow there, it might cause less people to go up into the mountain in July. It also just has an impact then on that area, alongside what energy consumption and uses. And I know that having been skiing in Maine, they were local, it's great. It obviously creates employment as a social economic side to it as well. And I guess seeing how that all factors in, if somebody's actually sat down and looked at it and crunched all the different factors and kind of come up with a view and angle as to what that impact is, I guess I wonder if that just had been done alongside just energy consumption on snow production.
Well, I can't really speak to necessarily extending a season for skiing, but summer operations are certainly an interesting dialogue on that front, because from my view, there's all that investment in infrastructure, and then concentrated recreation in summer really can help overall the sustainability on all three fronts: economic, social, and environmental fronts for ski areas. But I don't really. That's to me, that's kind of iconic A-Basin. So, skiing in July with or without snowmaking because of their altitude and the Colorado climate. Any other, all really good conversations. Okay, is anybody now interested in the ski industry? Maybe, maybe not. or wherever you go in tourism, hopefully this has been informative around the role of sustainability and what other parts of tourism where you might end up and how sustainability can help be a lens through around tourism management. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm happy to stick around if anybody else has any questions.
Thank you.